Okay, good evening everyone, Shalom Aleichem. We're continuing in the Chabura. So, we're learning Sefer Devora. And of course, like we review every week, the Devora, the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Carvero says that it is fitting that one becomes similar to the Creator, and then we will be similar to Him not only in our physical features, but in our actions as well. So we're learning the midas ha'elyonos. Number one, mikel kamach, the supernatural patience and tolerance of Hashem, that even though He gifts us with life force, we use it against Him, He doesn't retract it. Number two, noisei avain, He bears sin that Hashem tolerates and feeds the mashchis that we create when we do an avera. And when He forgives us, He's over al pesha, He cleans the mess Himself. He doesn't say, you made the mess, you clean it up. He cleans it up. He treats us like His own flesh and blood. He feels our pain. He rejoices with our success. He considers us His beloved children, like in this week's parsha, Parshas Re'eh, Bonim Atem L'Hashem Lekechem. She'iris, like His flesh and blood. Lehechsik lo arapai, He does not allow His anger to flare forever. At a certain point, He just stops it even when we are undeserving. Why? Ki Chofetz Chesed hu. Now this is very important. That Hashem, when He looks at a person, He hones in on the Chesed that the person did, the Middah of Chesed, and He just has eyes for that, and that is alone to calm Hashem's anger, so to speak. Okay, bear that in mind when we come to today's Middah. Middah number 7, Yashuv Yerachamenu, that when Hashem takes us back, He takes us back even greater than before. And then last week we were learning about Yichbosh Avonoseinu. Yichbosh Avonoseinu is the secret of Kvishas Avain. Hashem squelches sin. Sin, Hashem takes a pot and He covers the sin and He doesn't let the sin go up. But the mitzvahs are constantly expanding and increasing and they rise up in front of Him. That's the reason why Hashem cannot reward us in this world, because the mitzvah has already gone up to the next world. So what He's going to reward us down in this world for something that rises before Him in the next world. Therefore, schar b'hai amaleka. That's why God will not, let's say a person did 100 mitzvahs and 10 averos, He's not going to say, let's just call it a day at 90. It's not worth it to cancel that, because the mitzvah is on a much different plane and level than the avera. The avera is squelched. The mitzvah is on a completely different plane. So the averos don't rise before Him. Hashem squelches them, and the avera rises before Him. So, Reb Shmuel asked, they don't know you as that, right? You know Reb Shmuel?
Too many Shmuels.
Shmuel
Mechel, Shmuel me. Too many.
Me, this one. What? Asked a very important question, and that is, once we had the 6th Middah, Ki Chofetz Chesed hu, that Hashem hones in on Chesed, even though a person may have done many, many averos. But when Hashem looks at the person, He just sees Chesed. He just sees Chesed. So then this Middah seems to be superfluous. Hashem squelches sin and the averos rise before Him, which basically means Hashem is focused in on the mitzvahs and He's ignoring the averos. So this question is raised by the Peirush on Devora B'halachta B'drachav of Rav Goldberg, Shlita, Rabbi Aaron David Goldberg, Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivas, tells in Viklif Aleph Vav Hey Yod Vav, Oy Ha Yoy, Ohio. Okay? And he brings a very beautiful teaching in the Reishis Chachma, and we'll learn his answer, and I'm going to tell you my answer. The Reishis Chachma says in Shar HaNava that we should learn from the midas of Hashem. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, even when Hashem gets angry, Hashem remembers the tzaddikim. Like it says, Vayihi b'shaches Elokim es arei hakikar, when Hashem was destroying the cities of Sodom, the cities on the plain. Vayizkar Elokim es Avraham, Hashem remembered Abraham. So even during Hashem's anger, Hashem remembered Abraham. And Lot, what did Hashem remember for Lot? That he was silent when Abraham said about Sarah that she's my sister, and Lot didn't spill the beans. The Reishis Chachma says this is one of the midas of Rachamim, mi kel kamaycha, that Hashem squelches sin. What does that mean, Hashem squelches sin? That even when it's time to punish, it was a midas hadin, so Hashem was punishing Sodom. What does Hashem do? He squelches sin and remembers a particular midah tova that a person has. Fine. So what is this midah? Is that Hashem does not forget a chesed that a person did. So Rabbi Shmuel asked, so that's the midah number 6, ki chafetz chesed. That when Hashem looks at a person's repertoire, he just sees the chesed as what looms large. Hashem doesn't see the faults. So that's what happened with Lot. That Lot had probably many averos, but he did a chesed to Abram, and that's what loomed largest. So what's the difference between ki chafetz chesed and Yichbosh Avonoseinu? Yeah? So Rav Goldberg says like this: Ki chafetz chesed is if Hashem sees the person has the Middah of chesed, where the quality of chesed is part of their character, so the person themselves is worthy of rachamim because they as part of their personality have this character trait. It's not just something they did one time or they do sometimes, it's who they are. That's the midah of ki chafetz chesed. Yichbosh Avonoseinu is, even if it's not a midah that the person has, even if it's an isolated act, Hashem will squelch sin and hone in on the good deed. So I guess you could still ask, so then what do you need ki chafetz chesed for, if Hashem is even willing to hone in on a good deed, even if the person doesn't have the midah? Certainly Hashem would hone in on the midah, so then that other midah is not necessary. That's Rav Goldberg's approach. But he adds one nakuda that he says, and I would focus more on this, is that when it comes time to rewarding someone, Hashem doesn't say, well, this person is rotten, I'm not going to reward him. Hashem, so to speak, squelches all sin and therefore rewards for the ma'isa hatoiva, the ma'isa chesed that the person did. So in other words, it's not just that ki chafetz chesed, who is Hashem, hones in on the midah, and here Hashem hones in on the good deed. It's Hashem does not allow sin to cloud reward for good things that you do. I want to expand on this idea a little bit more. Ki chafetz, if you look back at Middah 6, ki chafetz chesed, there it's talking about at a time that Hashem is angry, like at the time of the Churban, where Hashem wanted to just destroy them and they deserved klaya. What did Hashem do? The pasuk says, "Vayera lakruvim tavnes yad adam tachas kanfehem." It says Hashem wanted lechalo yisas hakoel lekakea beit sasan. So Hashem says to Gabriel, they're goyimim chesed, so therefore even if they're chayiv, they'll be saved. In other words, I would identify ki chafetz chesed is at a time of strict din, when a person deserves to be utterly destroyed, Hashem says, oh, wait a second. I don't know. Right now, they're a bal chesed, I see them as good, as a saving grace to save someone from being punished. That's the midah of ki chafetz chesed. It's at a time of where a person deserves to be nechrav, to be destroyed, Hashem will hone in. No, we're going to save them because of the chesed. Now we're talking about, I would say in Middah 8, we're talking about something a little different. Now we're talking about reward. So you could have a guy, how is a person rewarded? We have to make an assessment who they are. So how does Hashem assess a person to determine who they are? Regarding that, Hashem says, well, who they are? I don't see any sin. All I see are mitzvahs, rising up in front of me. So therefore, I'm not going to cancel out even one of their mitzvahs, because a mitzvah is qualitatively on a much higher plane than an avera. In other words, I would say it's not that that's a midah and these are mitzvahs. I would say this is a different, it's a completely different midah. That midah is at a time of great midas hadin. Hashem is not going to punish a person because he's going to hone in on the fact that they did a chesed, even if it's not a midah, even that they did a chesed. Here, it's in terms of reward. the system of reward is such, the way reward works, our mitzvahs rise up. So that's one element of Yichbosh Avonoseinu. Mitzvahs rise up, but Hashem doesn't allow Averos to rise up. And furthermore, because He doesn't allow it to rise up, therefore He will never deduct from mitzvahs because of Averos. I would say it's just a completely, categorically different.
Yeah, until Torah applies it to how a person should conduct themselves. Because when he applies it by Chofetz, how does he apply it?
Yeah.
It's like he's applying it in a very similar way. I hear what you're saying about okay. The Middah itself could be looked at.
See there, you see,
Chofetz Chesed can be viewed as you're looking in a time of.
You see, yeah, Ki Chofetz Chesed, who I would say.
But
even if a guy gets you angry, you really should be angry. He's getting on your nerves. You really be upset at them. But if he did a chesed to you or to others, you say, Yaspik lo yitzar tzad ze levato kasmiyav. That's enough that I shouldn't be angry. That's commensurate with Ki Chofetz Chesed, because Ki Chofetz Chesed is at a time of din, Hashem will assuage His anger. So too, if I have a problem with my friend, then we should look at the good that he has and not to be angry. Here we're talking about how does Hashem assess us? Reward.
Right. It makes.
You want to know how He applies it here in number 8?
Right, where He applies.
We didn't read it yet. Let's see that. Okay.
It sounds good, but when the way He applies it.
Fine. Where are we up to in reading? Okay. So let's finish reading it. Okay. V'hainu Yichbosh Avonoseinu. She'ein hu avonos misgabrim lefanav k'mitzvos. The averos do not magnify and become powerful before God like mitzvahs. Ela koiveish oisam, Hashem squelches them, shlo yisalu, that they shouldn't rise, lo yikansu, and they shouldn't enter. Im heyoishu mashgiach al darcheish, even though God is divinely watching man's ways, hatoi v'hara, what's good and bad. Im kol zeh, nevertheless, in other words, it's not that Hashem doesn't see it, yes, He sees it. Im kol zeh hatoi v'eino yikoivshay, the good He doesn't squelch. Ela poireach va'oila ad l'ma'od, it flies and rises very much. V'nichlal mitzvah b'mitzvah, and one mitzvah is incorporated with another mitzvah. It adds, and it becomes a binyan chazak. V'nivna mimena binyan. In other words, not only do the mitzvahs rise, but they join one with the other, and it builds great buildings, ulavush nichbad, and a very honorable cloak. In other words, the Rav Goldberg brings, there's a concept in Kabbalah, chalukah d'Rabbanan, that in Olam Haba you're cloaked in this beautiful cloak that's weaved out of the various mitzvahs you did, and there's an idea that in Olam Haba you have tremendous real estate holdings from the various mitzvahs that you did. In fact, there's a statement in Chazal where somebody went around saying, okay, who wants me to buy beautiful buildings for them? And one of the Tanam said, me. So Rabbi Kiva took the money, maybe from Reb Tarfon, and he gave it all to tzedakah. So Reb Tarfon's like, where's my real estate? And Rabbi Kiva says, I gave it to charity. He said, what about all the houses? He said, yeah, I bought you houses upstairs. So there's an idea that when you do mitzvahs, it adds up, it builds, it combines. Averos are like, they're like marshmallows, nothing you do with them. You can't make clothing out of it. Upstairs, you can't make buildings out of it. Sin doesn't have this mystical power. God squelches them. It doesn't have this great success. It doesn't enter inside. In other words, Averos are like wimps. They're like, what are you doing? So, a mitzvah is like a good, firm handshake. An avera is like a nebach. Sometimes I'm rabbi, so I see some people give a good handshake. Some people, hey pal, like wake up, are you alive? Like give a good hand. Averas are wimps, So, okay, so now we have to see how does this apply. I would have said, according to the way I'm learning, the way it applies to interpersonal is that in the way we look at our friend, even if, let's say like this, I invited him to my wedding, he didn't come. I invited him to my wedding, he didn't come. He didn't invite me to his wedding. Maybe 20 years ago he invited me. He snubs me all the time. One time he invited me to a wedding. So I'm not good with him. I'm not good with him. No, if one time he invited you to his wedding, that's all you should see in your eyes. So you assess him. you evaluate him as like he's your good buddy. This is also with this midah, a person has to accord themselves. You should not squelch the goodness that your friend does. And just remember the bad. Just the opposite. Yichbosh hara, squelch the bad. Forget it. And cast it away. No evil should live in your mind. In other words, when you're assessing your friend, even though he snubbed you 500 times and he did like 3 favors for you, it's not that, I'm angry at him, so now, but I'm going to calm down because of the good. That's ki Chofetz Chesed. This Middah of Yichbosh Avonoseinu is, the good that he did to me is so overwhelming, and that's what all I see, and that's all I think about, and whatever rotten things they did, that should just stay behind. And I don't think about that. And especially with your family. In other words, people say, my cousin, he's such a rotten guy, he did X, Y, and Z. Yeah, but he helped you 1 or 2 times. You should say, he helped me 1 or 2 times. That's all you think about. That's all you see when you evaluate him. Lo yagor b'megorei. None of the evil should dwell in your mind. V'tiyah ha'toiva stura tamid lefanav. The good that they did should always be arranged before you. V'yizkor lai ha'toiva. You should remember the good. V'yagbir lai. It should prevail al kol ha'masim shasei over everything bad that they did. I like my pshat, by the way, to answer your question better. Rather than Rav Gold was saying Middah as opposed to Maisa. Saying it's totally different. Ki Chofetz Chesed is identifying and focusing on Chesed to assuage anger. And Yichbosh Avonoseinu is in terms of the overall assessment of the reward, the way Hashem rewards us or the way we view somebody else.
I like it, but it's great. But
okay.
I thought part of the way we understood the whole idea of these midas is that it's something, one of the ways we learned is that it's not something that, these weren't midas that could be perceived by us.
Yeah.
The way you're defining ki Chofetz Chesed, it sounds like something that we could have perceived. Someone did it, because if we're talking about din and the action,
we can never
put it aside. But this midah, that's a lot, but wow, he did all these bad things, but since he did 2 things, wow, I'm going to only view the good.
Right.
That falls in line with other midas that we've been discussing, things that I wouldn't naturally perceive. The idea that someone in the moment did something bad to me, I could put it aside and think about the good he's done.
No, okay, but I'll just add, they're talking about really the person totally deserves to be obliterated. They're rotten to the core. They're terrible. They're really. It was. Okay, I want to finish. So don't make calculations and say, well, he did 3 good things and 4 bad things, so he's on the bad list. No. In other words, let's say like this. He did 100 bad things and 2 good things. So I should say he's on the bad list because we'll call it a day at 98. No, the good is so massive and so monumental that there's nothing that could cancel out. V'yomer, don't deduct and say im asli toiva, even though he did good, harei asli ra, he did bad. V'yishkach toiva, and you're going to forget the good. No, lo yasakin ela bera yisratze kol derech ritzay sheyuchal. When it comes to the evil, you should be consoled and overlook it and be assuaged as much as you can. V'hatoiva, but the good, don't let it move from your mind. Do not forsake it forever. Mi beinena, from before your eyes. V'yalim einoi min hara, ignore the bad kol ma sheyuchal. Kederech shakadosh baruch hu koivesh avonos. In other words, when you think of your father and your mother, all you should think about are the unbelievable things they did for you. When you think of your sister, your brother, your friend, your Rebbe, but one time he said this and this. Move that. Don't let it occupy real estate in your mind. It shouldn't take. If you're still harboring like resentment against somebody, no. Is it paying you rent? It's not paying you rent. Move out. Kick it out.
It sounds like it's a higher